Over the past decade or two, there has been a massive influx of remakes, reboots, and of course, sequels. The quality of these sequels range from good to okay to meh to wait, they made a sequel and bad, which is most of them, by the way. And to most audiences, this isn't exactly a surprising revelation, however. As the saying goes,
The sequel's never quite as good.
and leaving it just that. But no one really asks why the sequels aren't as quite as good. Why is it that so many sequels fail to live up to the original? So today, I thought I might answer that question and talk about why the sequel isn't quite as good.
Everybody strike up the band. We're doing a sequel. That's what we do in Hollywood.
Based off my experience of watching subsequent movie sequels, I've narrowed it down to three core reasons, starting with
Oh shit. Here we go again.
personally, I consider this to be Hollywood's greatest struggle when making a sequel, which is figuring out what happens next. How do you continue the story while keeping what made the first one great? And Hollywood's response is, fuck it, let's just make the first one again, but slightly different. Sort of like how you would copy your friend's essay, but change up a few things so your teacher doesn't notice. As a result, we have sequels that retread some of the same plot points and themes as the last movie. We see this happen in films like Ghostbusters 2, where the Ghostbusters try to catch ghosts despite the public thinking they're full of crap. After catching a few ghosts, they become really popular. Then the Ghostbusters meet a woman named Dana, who is being stalked by ghosts. So the Ghostbusters try to help Dana, but they get outed by a man with no dick and get thrown in jail. Only then for them to be bailed out by the mayor, and the Ghostbusters go on to defeat the main villain by destroying their power source. Again in Home Alone 2, where after a bitter confrontation with his family, Kevin wishes he didn't have a family, so he gets separated after a series of unfortunate events. Kevin is then left to fend for himself while also being pursued by the Wet Bandits. He is then saved by someone who is scary at first but turned out to be nice, and learns to value his family. Or what about Die Hard 2, where John McClane goes to pick up his wife on Christmas Eve, only for the place to be taken over by terrorists. So John McClane has to sneak around and pick off the terrorists one by one. Yeah, you see where this is going.
Something very familiar about all this.
What I personally dislike about sequels retreading old ground is the idea that Hollywood thinks what we want from a sequel is to see the same movie again, but with some minor tweaks. Because if I wanted to see the same movie again, I would just watch the goddamn first one again. So what's the point of making a sequel if you're just going to rehash the same plot? Which leads me to my next point.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they didn't stop to think if they should.
To me, a lot of sequels being made seem really unnecessary in my opinion. Sometimes movies don't have anything worth expanding on, or other times the movie ended so well that it didn't need a sequel. We see this happen a lot with Disney sequels, most notably its straight-to-video content and Pixar films. Not only are they trying to expand upon a story that ended with everything tied up, but they are also trying to expand upon something with nothing else to expand upon. Like, did we really want to know what happens after Happily Ever After? Do we really need to see what happens to Ariel and Eric, Belle and Beast, Cinderella, or Prince Charming? Now, to be fair, some of these sequels aren't half bad and do expand upon the story in an interesting way. But 9 times out of 10, there's nothing to expand upon. Take Toy Story, for example. Toy Story 4 is fine, I suppose, but I thought this sequel was really unnecessary because Toy Story 3 ended so phenomenally. I felt satisfied and thought there shouldn't be a sequel. But leave it to Disney to milk an IP dry until they suck all the life out of this once majestic horse. To quote Pet Cemetery.
Sometimes that is better.
But what happens when you do have an idea for a sequel? A sequel that not only expands on the source material, but continues the story in a meaningful way, and all you have to do is execute that idea. Which leads me to my last point.
Make the plan, execute the plan, expect the plan to go off the rails, throw away the plan.
What ultimately determines the quality of your story is how you execute it. It doesn't matter how cool and interesting your ideas are, none of that matters if you execute it poorly. There have been films with some massive sequel potential, but fell flat because they were handled by the wrong people. Take Jurassic World, for example. I liked it just fine, but After some retrospective, I realized this movie had squandered some massive potential. I really like the idea of seeing Jurassic Park being fully operational and seeing genetically modified dinosaurs. There are some really cool ideas here that could be explored. Sadly, we didn't get to explore those ideas, so we ended up with a film with shallow characters, mediocre CGI, enough plot holes to fill a mass grave, ridiculous plans to weaponize dinosaurs, running in high heels, and, stay with me now, rehash plot elements from previous Jurassic Park movies. Again, what's really upsetting to me is that this had potential to be a great movie in its own right, but once again, squandered by the people behind it. And for the love of God, don't get me started on the goddamn Star Wars sequels!
Somehow Palpatine returned.
God willing, we'll all meet again in Spaceballs 2 to search for more money.
Before I end this video, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about. 3 of the greatest sequels of all time are Empire Strikes Back, Aliens, and Terminator 2. And what all these have in common is that they all went on to do something completely different from what the last film did, while keeping what made the first film great. But this got me thinking, maybe what we want isn't the same thing, but what we really want is something new.